The alert klaxon tore Commander James Wilson from his sleep. He fumbled in the dark, his hand slapping against the comm panel beside his bunk. "Wilson here," he grunted, fighting off the fog of interrupted rest. "Commander, you need to come to the bridge immediately," said Lieutenant Adams, her voice tight with tension. "Something's appeared at the edge of our sensor range." "Something? Be more specific, Lieutenant." A pause. "Sir, it's the Tenacity." James sat bolt upright, suddenly wide awake. The Tenacity had been lost during the early Centauri War, nearly 80 years ago. It was one of the most famous lost ships in Earth Alliance history, its disappearance the subject of countless documentaries and conspiracy theories. "I'll be right there." The corridors of Border Station Frontier were quiet at this late hour, with only the skeleton night crew manning essential systems. James moved quickly, his mind racing. This had to be a mistake. The Tenacity couldn't possibly have returned after 8 decades. When the bridge doors slid open, all eyes turned to him. "Report," he ordered, moving to the central display. Lieutenant Adams gestured to the main view screen. "It appeared 20 minutes ago, sir. Just materialized at the edge of our sensor range. Hull markings confirm it's the Earth Alliance warship Tenacity, registry EAW-2189. On the screen, a dark silhouette drifted against the star field. The vessel's shape was unmistakable, a Valiant-class destroyer, an older model that hadn't been built in 60 years. Its hull was scarred and blackened in places, with strange protrusions and modifications visible even at this distance. "Hail it," James ordered. "We've been trying since it appeared, sir." No response on any channel. James studied the readings. "Life signs." "None we can detect," replied the sensor officer. "But there's some kind of interference making detailed scans difficult. Power signatures are minimal, just enough for basic life support and artificial gravity. No weapon systems or engines appear to be active." James rubbed his chin, considering their options. "Get me Admiral Carter on a secure channel." Minutes later, the weathered face of Admiral Lisa Carter appeared on the comm screen. Despite the early hour, she looked alert. "I've reviewed your initial report, Commander. This is unprecedented." "What are my orders, Admiral?" "Assemble a team and investigate. The Tenacity has been missing for 80 years. We need to know what happened to her, and how she found her way back to Earth space." 6 hours later, James stood in the shuttle bay, surveying his team. He'd selected 5 people: Lieutenant Adams, his tactical officer; Dr. Miller, the station's chief medical officer; Chief Engineer Patel, Security Officer Rodriguez, and Ensign Taylor, a promising young tech specialist. "Let me be clear," James said as they prepared to board the shuttle. "We have no idea what we're walking into. The Tenacity disappeared fighting the Centauri. Whatever we find may give us answers to one of the greatest mysteries in Alliance history. Stay alert, stay together, and maintain constant communication." The short journey to the derelict warship was tense and silent. As their shuttle approached, James got his first close look at the vessel. The hull was not merely damaged, it had been altered. Strange, angular modules had been grafted onto the original structure, and portions of the ship appeared to have been rebuilt using unfamiliar technology. "Those aren't Centauri modifications," Adams said quietly. "I've never seen anything like this." The shuttle docked with a metallic thunk, the airlock cycling to match the Tenacity's atmosphere. Readings showed it was breathable, though cold. "Suits on, but visors up," James ordered. "If atmospheric conditions change, seal immediately." The team stepped through the airlock into darkness. Their helmet lights cut through the gloom, revealing a docking bay much smaller than modern designs. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, undisturbed for what might have been decades. "Power's at minimal levels," Patel noted, checking his instruments. "Main systems are offline. We're seeing only emergency lighting and basic life support." James nodded. "Taylor, see if you can access a terminal and download the ship's logs." Patel, Check the engine room. Miller, Adams, you're with me. We'll head to the bridge. Rodriguez, secure our exit. The corridors of the Tenacity were a maze of shadows. Many sections were blocked by sealed bulkheads or strange crystalline growths that seemed to have formed within the ship itself. The modifications were more obvious inside. Entire sections had been rebuilt using technology James didn't recognize. This architecture isn't human, Dr. Miller whispered, running her scanner over a wall of dark, reflective material. The molecular structure is unlike anything in our database. As they approached the bridge, the temperature dropped noticeably. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. "Commander," Adams called, her light fixed on the deck. Footprints. A single set of boot prints was visible in the dust, leading away from the bridge. "Recent?" James asked. Adams knelt to examine them. "No, these are old, but preserved because nothing's disturbed them. Someone walked this way a long time ago." The bridge, when they finally reached it, was a study in contrasts. Half of it remained recognizably human. Stations for navigation, weapons, and communications laid out in the standard Earth Alliance configuration of 80 years ago. The other half had been transformed, the familiar consoles replaced by organic-looking interfaces that pulsed with faint internal light. "Look for the captain's log. Anything that might tell us what happened," James ordered, moving to what had once been the command chair. The screens were dark, but Taylor managed to reroute power. Ancient systems hummed to life, displays flickering with data in both English and an alien script none of them recognized. "I've got something," Taylor said. "Last log entry, dated. This can't be right." "What is it?" James asked. "According to this, the last log entry was made just 2 months ago, sir." Before James could respond, his comm crackled. "Commander," came Patel's voice, tight with tension. "You need to come to Deck 3, Section 12. I found something." The team regrouped and made their way deeper into the ship. Patel was waiting outside a sealed door marked cryogenics. "It's active," he said simply. "One pod is still functioning." James ordered the door opened. Inside, a single cryogenic stasis pod hummed quietly among rows of empty, damaged units. Its surface was frosted over, but through the clouded viewport, the outline of a human face was visible. Dr. Miller rushed forward, checking the pod's systems. "The occupant is alive," she said, amazement in her voice. "Male, stable vital signs. According to the pod's data, he's been in stasis for 78 years, with multiple revival and re-entry cycles." James stepped closer, wiping frost from the viewport with his gloved hand. The face of a man in his 40s became visible, his expression peaceful in suspended animation. On his collar were the insignia of a captain in the Earth Alliance Navy. "My God," James whispered. "It's him. It's Captain Marcus Reed, the legendary commander of the Tenacity, the man whose final transmission had become famous throughout the Alliance. We stand our ground. Whatever comes through that breach, we'll show them humanity doesn't surrender." After 80 years lost in the void of space, Captain Reed had somehow brought his ship home. "Prepare for revival," James ordered. It's time we heard his story. The medical bay of Border Station Frontier was silent except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment. Captain Marcus Reed lay motionless on the bed, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Dr. Miller checked his vitals for the 10th time since they had brought him aboard. "How long until he wakes up?" Commander James Wilson asked, standing at the foot of the bed. "Hard to say," Miller replied. "His body has been in and out of stasis for decades. The revival process is going well, but the psychological shock..." She trailed off, shaking her head. James studied Reed's face. Despite being chronologically over 120 years old, the captain appeared to be in his mid-40s, his features weathered but strong. Only the occasional strand of gray in his dark hair hinted at the passage of time. Suddenly, Reed's eyelids fluttered. His heart rate spiked on the monitor. "He's coming around," Miller said, moving quickly to his side. Reed's eyes shot open, wild, unfocused, filled with terror. His hand lashed out, grabbing Miller's wrist with surprising strength. "Where am I?" he demanded, his voice hoarse from disuse. "What have you done with my crew?" "Captain Reed, you're safe," James said firmly. "You're on Border Station Frontier, Earth Alliance territory." Reed's eyes darted around the room, taking in the medical equipment, the uniforms, searching for something familiar. Slowly, his grip on Miller relaxed. "Earth Alliance?" he whispered, confusion clouding his features. "How?" "Your ship, the Tenacity, appeared at the edge of our sensor range yesterday," James explained. "We found you in stasis. You've been missing for 80 years, Captain." Reed's face went slack with shock. 80 years? He struggled to sit up. "No, that can't be right. I've only been traveling for—" He stopped, his brow furrowed as he tried to piece together fragmented memories. "What's the last thing you remember?" Miller asked gently. Reed closed his eyes, his hands clenching into fists. "The battle. We were engaging a Centauri battle cruiser near the Arcturus jump point. We took heavy damage, but we were holding our own." His voice grew stronger as the memories returned. Then something else appeared. Not Centauri. Something massive. It disabled both ships with some kind of energy pulse. James pulled up a chair and sat down. "Take your time, Captain." Reed nodded, gathering his thoughts. "After that, my memories come in fragments. Darkness, cold, pain." He opened his eyes, and James saw raw anguish there. "They took us, my entire crew, 217 men and women." "Who took you?" "They never told us their name. They didn't communicate with words. But I heard it, in my mind, when they—" Reed swallowed hard. "When they were inside my thoughts. They call themselves the Void." A chill ran down James's spine. What did they want? To understand us. To study us. Reed's voice became flat, emotionless, as if distancing himself from the horror of his words. "They did experiments. Took people apart. Put them back together. They wanted to know how we worked, physically and mentally. They were especially interested in our capacity for pain, for hope, for fear." Miller touched Reed's arm gently. "Captain, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Reed interrupted. "You need to understand what's coming." He turned back to James. "At first, I thought they were just curious. Cruel, but curious. Then I realized the truth. They were afraid of us." "Afraid? Of humans?" James asked, skeptical. Reed nodded. "Not of what we are, but of what we might become. They've been watching us for centuries, monitoring our development. Something about us terrifies them." He tried to stand but stumbled, his legs weak after decades in stasis. James helped him back onto the bed. "How did you escape?" James asked. A dark smile crossed Reed's face. "They underestimated human stubbornness. Over the years, they became careless. They thought I was broken, compliant. But I was watching, learning. They had integrated parts of our ship into their vessel for study. During a power fluctuation, I managed to reach the stasis chamber where they kept some of us preserved between experiments." Reed's hands trembled slightly. "I couldn't save the others. God help me, I tried. But I could pilot what remained of the Tenacity. I stole it back from them and ran." "And you've been running for decades?" Miller asked. Reed nodded slowly, in and out of stasis to conserve resources, stopping only to make repairs when necessary. I crossed vast stretches of uncharted space. Sometimes they were right behind me. Sometimes I lost them for years at a time. But they never stopped hunting." "Why come back to Earth space?" James asked. "You led them right to us." Reed's eyes flashed with anger. "You think I don't know that? I tried to find another way, but they're coming regardless. They've always been coming. I brought back the only advantage we have, knowledge of what we're facing." He grabbed James's arm. You need to warn Earth. The Tenacity contains data I've collected, modifications I've made using their technology. It might give us a fighting chance." Admiral Carter entered the medical bay, having listened silently from the doorway for several minutes. "Captain Reed," she said, stepping forward, "I've reviewed the preliminary findings from your ship. Some of the technology aboard is beyond our current understanding." Reed looked up at her. "Admiral, we don't have time for careful study. The Void follow patterns. They're methodical, patient, but once they commit to action, they move quickly. If the Tenacity has returned to Earth space, they won't be far behind." Carter's expression remained neutral. "With all due respect, Captain, we only have your word for all of this. The Earth Alliance has protocols for first contact situations. If these Void are as advanced as you claim, perhaps diplomatic." "Diplomatic?" Reed laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "They don't want diplomacy. They want to ensure we never become a threat. They showed me visions of what they plan to do. Not extermination, that would be merciful. They want to keep some of us alive for study. The rest will be altered, changed to remove whatever they fear in us." He swung his legs over the side of the bed, forcing himself to stand despite Miller's protests. "You don't believe me. I understand. I wouldn't believe me either. But you've seen my ship. You've seen what they did to it. What they did to me." Reed straightened to his full height, and despite his physical weakness, there was an intensity in his eyes that commanded attention. "I'm not asking you to take my word for it, Admiral. I'm asking you to prepare. Because whether you believe me or not, they are coming. And when they arrive, humanity will face a choice: submission or resistance." Carter studied him for a long moment. "Very well, Captain. I'll order a full analysis of the Tenacity and its systems. In the meantime, you'll be debriefed thoroughly." After Carter left, Reed sank back onto the bed, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "They won't be ready," he murmured, more to himself than to James. "No one can be ready for the Void." James watched the legendary captain, a man out of time, carrying the weight of a nightmare only he had witnessed. "Get some rest, Captain," he said. "Tomorrow we'll begin preparing for what's coming." Reed closed his eyes. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "After 80 years of running, I finally ran out of tomorrows." 3 days after Captain Reed's return, the command center of Border Station Frontier buzzed with activity. Engineers, scientists, and military personnel moved between workstations with urgent purpose. At the center of it all stood Commander James Wilson, studying the holographic display of the Tenacity. "This technology is unlike anything we've ever seen," Chief Engineer Patel said, highlighting sections of the ship. "The hull has been reinforced with some kind of living metal that can repair itself. The propulsion system combines our original engines with something that bends space in ways our physics can barely explain." James nodded, taking it all in. "And the weapons, if you can call them that," Patel replied. "They're not traditional weapons as we understand them. They seem designed to disable rather than destroy. To capture." A chill ran down James's spine as he remembered Reed's account of his crew's fate. Before he could respond, the doors slid open, and Admiral Carter entered with a group of officials in both military and civilian dress. "Commander Wilson," Carter said formally, "this is the first contact assessment team from Earth Command. They'll be taking over the investigation of the Tenacity and the debriefing of Captain Reed." James recognized the insignia of Earth intelligence on several of the newcomers. "With respect, Admiral, we're already making progress. My team has been working around the clock." "And we appreciate your efforts," interrupted a tall woman in civilian clothes. "I'm Director Keller, Earth Alliance Diplomatic Corps. We need to approach this situation with caution and clarity." James bristled at her tone, but maintained his composure. "Director, have you spoken with Captain Reed yet?" "We have," Keller replied. "While his account is concerning, we must consider the psychological effects of his trauma. 80 years is a long time for memory and perception to remain reliable. You think he's lying? James asked incredulously. Not lying, Keller said, but perhaps not entirely accurate in his assessment of these void creatures and their intentions. In the adjoining room, visible through a glass partition, Captain Reed sat at a table surrounded by intelligence officers. Despite having regained some physical strength, he looked exhausted, his patience clearly wearing thin as he answered the same questions repeatedly. James turned back to Keller. The evidence is in front of you. The tenacity itself proves something encountered us out there, something with technology far beyond our own. Which is precisely why we need to approach this carefully, Keller replied. If these beings are as advanced as the ship suggests, we should be looking for peaceful contact, not preparing for war based on one man's account. Admiral Carter stepped between them. We're pursuing all options, Commander. Defense preparations are already underway, but diplomacy remains our first choice. James wanted to argue further, but was interrupted by a young officer rushing into the room. Admiral, we're detecting spatial anomalies at the edge of the Arcturus sector. Multiple signatures, matching the unusual energy pattern of the Tenacity's arrival. The room fell silent. Carter moved quickly to the main display. Show me. The screen shifted to show the vast emptiness of space near the Arcturus jump point. The same location where the Tenacity had disappeared 80 years ago. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but then James noticed it. Subtle distortions, like ripples in still water, spreading across the starfield. How many? Carter asked. We're counting 7 distinct anomalies, Admiral, all identical to the one that preceded the Tenacity's appearance. Through the glass, James saw Reed stand abruptly, pushing away from his interrogators. He'd heard the commotion and was now staring at the display, his face drained of color. Let him in, James said quietly to Carter. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded, and a guard opened the door. Reed walked straight to the display, his eyes never leaving the spatial distortions. It's them, he said simply. This is how they travel. They don't use jump gates like we do. They tear holes in space itself. How long do we have? Carter asked. Reed studied the patterns. Days, maybe less. These are scout ships, the Vanguard. They'll map the system, assess our defenses, report back, and then? Keller asked, her diplomatic confidence noticeably shaken. And then the harvester ships will come. Reed's voice was flat, emotionless. You still don't believe me, do you? Despite everything. Before anyone could answer, Lieutenant Adams called out from her station. Commander, something's happening to the Tenacity. All eyes turned to the external cameras showing the derelict warship. It had been moved to a secure dock for study, but now its strange modifications were pulsing with an eerie blue light. Power readings were spiking throughout the ship. It's responding to them, Reed said urgently. There must be some kind of quantum entanglement between their technology and what they installed on my ship. You need to disconnect all systems immediately. James didn't wait for orders. Full quarantine protocols. Cut all connections to the Tenacity, physical and wireless. Engineers scrambled to comply, but they were too slow. The station's lights flickered as something invaded their systems. Displays glitched, showing fragments of alien symbols before returning to normal. What just happened? Carter demanded. They know we're here, Reed said grimly. They just scanned us through their tech on my ship. The implications hung heavy in the air. Earth's first official contact with the void had begun, not with diplomacy, but with infiltration. Hours later, James found Reed alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The captain looked older somehow, the weight of his experiences etched more deeply into his face. They've called an emergency council meeting on Earth, James said, joining him at the viewport. Your testimony will be broadcast to all Alliance leaders. Reed nodded without turning. Will they listen? After what happened today, they have to. It won't be enough, Reed said quietly. Words never are. Not until they see for themselves what the void can do. James hesitated before asking, "What didn't you tell us, Captain, about your time with them?" Reed was silent for a long moment. "Everything I told you was true, but there's more." He finally turned to face James. "I didn't just escape. I learned from them. Every moment of my captivity, every experiment they performed, every time they tore into my mind. I was studying them too." His eyes had a dangerous gleam that James hadn't noticed before. "The modifications to the tenacity weren't all they're doing. After I escaped, I adapted their technology, improved it. There's a reason it took me decades to return. I wasn't just running. I was preparing." "Preparing for what?" James asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "War," Reed said simply. "The kind of war humanity has never fought before. Not for territory or resources or ideology. A war for our very nature, for what makes us human." He placed a hand against the cold glass of the viewport, as if reaching for the distant stars. "The void fear us because they've seen our potential. They glimpsed what we might become. And it terrifies them." "And what is that?" James asked. Reed smiled, a grim, determined expression that sent a shiver down James's spine. "Something they can never be," he answered. "Something that can defeat them." In the distance, the tenacity floated in its dock, its alien modifications now dark and dormant. But James couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting, just as Reed had been waiting for 80 years, for the moment when humanity would understand what truly threatened them from the depths of space. And when that moment came, hope might die, but something else would rise in its place. Something that even the void would learn to fear. 1 week after the spatial anomalies were detected, the War Council on Earth reached its decision. Despite Captain Reed's warnings and the growing evidence of an approaching threat, the majority voted for a diplomatic approach. "Fools," Reed muttered as he watched the announcement on the viewscreen in his quarters on Border Station Frontier. "They're sending a welcome party to their own execution." Commander James Wilson stood nearby, his expression grim. "Admiral Carter will be leading the delegation. 3 ships, including our newest diplomatic vessel, the Unity. They depart tomorrow for the Arcturus jump point." Reed switched off the screen and turned to face James. "And what are your orders, Commander?" "To maintain position and continue studying the tenacity. To keep you under observation." James hesitated. "And to prepare defensive measures, quietly." A small smile touched Reed's lips. "So not everyone is convinced by the diplomatic approach. Let's just say some of us prefer to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst." James moved toward the door, then paused. "The engineering team has restored basic functionality to the Tenacity's bridge. I thought you might want to know." Reed's eyes narrowed. "Why tell me this?" "Because if things go badly, you're the only person who has ever faced these creatures and survived." With that, James left, leaving Reed alone with his thoughts. 3 days later, the diplomatic mission arrived at the coordinates where the spatial anomalies had been detected. The Unity broadcast peaceful greetings in all known languages and mathematical sequences designed to indicate intelligence and peaceful intent. For 12 hours they waited. Nothing happened. Then, without warning, space itself seemed to tear open. Not the controlled blue swirl of a jump gate, but a jagged wound in the fabric of reality. From this tear emerged a vessel unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was massive, at least 5 times the size of Earth's largest ship, with a design that defied conventional understanding. Part machine, part organic, constantly shifting and reforming itself. "This is Admiral Lisa Carter of the Earth Alliance," she broadcast. "We come in peace and wish to establish dialogue between our peoples." For several long minutes, there was no response. Then a pulse of energy swept over the 3 Earth ships. It wasn't a weapon, at least it caused no immediate damage. But every system on the vessels flickered momentarily. "They're scanning us," reported the Unity's science officer. "But it's more than that. The pulse is interactive. It's probing our computers, our communications. Before Carter could respond, every screen on the bridge filled with a strange, flowing script that shifted and changed even as they watched. Then it dissolved, reforming into English letters. We can't with you. The message was simple, chilling in its directness. Carter straightened her uniform. We wish to establish peaceful relations. We mean no harm. The response came immediately. Deception. The weapon, he is returne to you. You puri pair, for co nflit. Carter frowned. Weapon? We have brought no weapons. Our mission is peaceful. A new message appeared. The ship UKLTNA said Itui. The human UKL read. These are weapons against US. Surrender them. Understanding dawned on Carter's face. Captain Reed is a citizen of Earth. We do not surrender our people, but we wish to understand your concerns and address them through dialogue. For a long moment, there was no response. Then, without warning, more spatial tiers appeared around them. 3 more alien vessels emerged, surrounding the Earth ships. Admiral, her tactical officer said urgently. They're charging some kind of energy system. Defensive posture only, Carter ordered. Do not provoke them. But it was too late. The lead void ship released a focused beam of energy that struck the smallest Earth vessel, the scout ship Pathfinder. Instead of exploding, the ship simply went dark, all its systems failing simultaneously. Then a second beam enveloped it, and the Pathfinder began to disintegrate, not into an explosion, but into component parts that were drawn toward the void ship like metal to a magnet. Evasive maneuvers, Carter shouted. Get us out of here. Send emergency transmission to Earth Command. The Unity and the remaining escort turned to flee, but 2 more beams lashed out, catching the escort. Like the Pathfinder before it, it went dark, then began to be pulled apart. The Unity managed to activate its engines, accelerating away from the ambush. Behind them, Carter watched in horror as the void ships absorbed the remains of the 2 Earth vessels and their crews. Send the message, she ordered, her voice steadied despite the shock. The void are hostile. Reed was right. We are under attack. But before the transmission could be completed, a final energy beam caught the Unity's stern. The ship shuddered as systems failed throughout the vessel. Emergency power to engines and life support, Carter ordered. No response. Admiral, her second-in-command reported. Whatever they hit us with, it's draining all power. We're being pulled back toward them. Carter stood from her command chair. Send the message on emergency channels. Use the backup systems. As her crew fought to comply, Carter stared at the view screen where the void ships waited, ready to consume the Unity as they had the others. Reed was right, she whispered. Back at Border Station Frontier, klaxons blared as emergency transmissions flooded in from across the outer colonies. The Void had launched simultaneous attacks on multiple targets, not just the diplomatic mission. James raced onto the bridge, where chaos reigned. Report. Multiple colonies under attack, sir, Lieutenant Adams responded. New Austin, Proxima Colony, Galileo Station, all reporting the same thing. Ships appearing through spatial tiers, using some kind of energy weapon that shuts down our technology, then harvesting the disabled vessels and structures. Casualties. Adams looked up, her face pale. Unknown, sir, but the reports suggest the Void are taking people, not just destroying installations. Taking them for experiments, James thought, remembering Reed's account. Any word from the diplomatic mission? One partial transmission from the Unity. They were ambushed. Admiral Carter's final message confirmed Captain Reed's warnings before they were cut off. James made his decision. Where is Captain Reed now? Engineering section, sir. He's been examining the Tenacity since we restored power to its systems. Get him to the command center immediately. James turned to his tactical officer. What's the status of our defenses? We've activated all defensive systems, but based on the reports coming in, our conventional weapons have minimal effect on the void ships. Their technology simply absorbs or redirects our energy weapons, and physical projectiles don't penetrate their hulls. The doors slid open, and Reed entered. He took one look at the chaos on the bridge and understood immediately. "They've come," he said, not a question but a statement. James nodded grimly. "Multiple attacks, simultaneous. Our weapons are ineffective." Reed moved to the main display, studying the incoming reports. "They're following their standard pattern. Disable, capture, harvest. They'll take what they want and destroy the rest." "What do we do?" James asked. "Earth Command is mobilizing the fleet, but if our weapons can't harm them—" "There is one thing," Reed interrupted. "The modifications I made to the Tenacity. I've spent decades adapting their own technology against them. I found a weakness, a frequency that disrupts their energy fields, prevents them from absorbing our attacks. Can we adapt our weapons to this frequency?" Reed shook his head. "Not quickly enough. But the Tenacity is already equipped. I made sure of it." James stared at him. "The Tenacity is barely functional. Half its systems are still offline, and we don't have a crew trained to operate the alien modifications." "I can pilot it," Reed said firmly. "I've done it alone for decades, and I'll need only a small crew, volunteers who understand the risk." James considered for only a moment before nodding. "I'll authorize it, but Earth Command will need to approve." An incoming transmission cut him off. On the main screen appeared the stern face of Fleet Admiral Jackson, the highest-ranking military officer in the Earth Alliance. "Commander Wilson, our defensive line is failing. The void ships are penetrating deeper into our territory with each hour. We are authorizing all commands to use whatever means necessary to slow their advance while we evacuate civilian populations." James straightened. "Admiral, we may have a weapon that can hurt them. Captain Reed believes the Tenacity can penetrate their defenses." Jackson's eyes widened slightly at the mention of Reed. "The Tenacity is 80 years old, Commander." "With all due respect, sir, it's also 80 years more advanced than anything we have. Thanks to Captain Reed's modifications, he's requesting permission to take it into battle." After a brief hesitation, Jackson nodded. "Permission granted. At this point, Commander, we have nothing to lose." As the transmission ended, James turned to Reed. "How quickly can the Tenacity be ready?" A grim smile spread across Reed's face. "It's been ready for 80 years, Commander. I just needed someone to believe me." The Tenacity hummed with power as Captain Marcus Reed sat in the command chair for the first time in 8 decades. Around him, a skeleton crew of volunteers worked at stations that were a strange hybrid of human and alien technology. Commander James Wilson stood beside him, having insisted on joining the mission despite Reed's objections. "All systems operational," reported Lieutenant Adams from the tactical station. "As operational as they're going to get anyway." Reed nodded, his fingers dancing across the organic-looking interface built into the arm of his chair. The ship responded to his touch in ways that still unnerved the other crew members. Panels shifting, displays reconfiguring themselves, the very walls seeming to pulse with life. "This isn't like any Earth ship I've ever served on," James remarked quietly. "It's not entirely an Earth ship anymore," Reed replied. "Neither am I, in some ways." Before James could ask what he meant, a communication came through from Border Station Frontier. "Captain Reed, we've received word that a void fleet has breached our defenses at Proxima Centauri. They're heading directly for Earth. Fleet Admiral Jackson has ordered all available ships to form a defensive line at the Mars perimeter." Reed exchanged a glance with James. "We're not joining the defensive line," he said. "The Tenacity works best alone. Tell Admiral Jackson we're going to hit them from the flank, draw off their main force." After receiving confirmation, Reed engaged the ship's engines. The Tenacity moved smoothly away from the station, accelerating at a rate that belied its age and condition. "Set course for Proxima," Reed ordered. "Prepare for jump." As the ship aligned with the jump gate coordinates, Reed turned to James. "You should know what we're really doing." James raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" We're not just going to attack their flank. We're going for their command ship. Reed's eyes gleamed with a cold intensity. Every Void fleet has a central vessel that coordinates the others. If we can disable it, the rest will be thrown into disarray. How do you know which one it is? Reed smiled grimly. Because I was held captive on one for years. I know exactly what it looks like and how it operates. The jump gate activated, and the tenacity was pulled into the swirling blue vortex. Moments later, they emerged into a scene of devastation. The human colony on Proxima Centauri was burning, orbital platforms torn apart, civilian ships drifting lifelessly. Among the wreckage moved the Void vessels, dark and ominous against the stars. There, Reed said, pointing to a massive ship at the center of the Void formation. Unlike the others, it remained stationary, pulsing with energy as it coordinated the attack. That's our target. They'll detect us any second, James warned. Good. Reed's fingers flew across the controls. I want them to see us coming. The tenacity accelerated toward the heart of the Void fleet, its modified engines pushing it to speeds no Earth ship could match. On the view screen, several enemy vessels broke formation, moving to intercept. They recognized the tenacity, Reed said, satisfaction in his voice. They fear what I've learned about them. The first Void ship fired, sending a beam of energy toward them that had disabled every other human vessel it touched. But when it struck the tenacity, the ship's hull absorbed and redirected it, the alien modifications glowing with captured power. Return fire, Reed ordered. Adams activated the weapon systems. Instead of conventional weaponry, the tenacity released a pulse of energy that matched the frequency Reed had discovered during his years studying the Void. When it struck the enemy ship, the effect was immediate and devastating. The Void vessel's surface rippled, its form destabilizing as the pulse disrupted the connection between its organic and mechanical components. It's working, Adams exclaimed. All power to engines, Reed commanded. Get us past the escort ships. Head straight for the command vessel. The tenacity plunged deeper into the enemy formation, exchanging fire with the Void ships that moved to block their path. Some of their attacks got through, shaking the old warship violently, but Reed's modifications held. We've taken damage to the lower decks, Chief Engineer Puddle reported. The alien reinforcements are holding, but I don't know for how long. We don't need long, Reed said, his eyes fixed on the approaching command ship. It was enormous, easily 20 times the size of the tenacity, its surface shifting and reforming as it prepared to defend itself. They're powering up some kind of central weapon, Adams warned. Reed nodded. I remember it well. Brace for impact. The command ship released a massive pulse of energy that engulfed the tenacity completely. For a moment, all systems failed, and darkness enveloped the bridge. Then, one by one, the essential functions came back online. What happened? James asked, picking himself up from the floor. They tried to shut us down like they did to the other Earth ships, Reed explained. But I modify our systems specifically to counter that weapon. We absorbed enough of its energy to power our final approach. The view screen cleared, showing the command ship directly ahead, its massive hull filling their view. Their central core is exposed, Reed said, pointing to a pulsing section at the heart of the enemy vessel. That's where they coordinate the entire fleet. One direct hit with our disruption pulse at maximum power, and we can shut down their entire network. James looked at him sharply. At this range, the backlash would likely destroy the tenacity as well. Reed met his gaze steadily. I know. Understanding dawned on James's face. You never planned to survive this mission. I died 80 years ago, Commander. Everything since has been borrowed time. Reed turned to the crew. I'm ordering all of you to the escape pods. I can guide the tenacity in alone for the final approach. With respect, Captain, Adams said, we volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. The others nodded in agreement, and James placed a hand on Reed's shoulder. No one gets left behind this time. For a moment, Reed seemed about to argue, but then he nodded, accepting their choice. Charge the disruption pulse to maximum. Set collision course with their core. As the Tenacity accelerated toward its target, the Void command ship unleashed everything it had, beams of energy striking the human vessel from all sides. Systems failed across the ship, but its momentum carried it forward, unstoppable in its final approach. Disruption pulse charged to maximum. Adams reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Reed's hand hovered over the firing control. For Earth, he said quietly. For humanity. For my crew, who never made it home. He pressed the control, and the Tenacity released its final weapon, not a conventional explosion, but a precisely tuned energy pulse that struck the Void ship's core and spread throughout its system like a virus. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The command ship's surface began to ripple and tear, its control over the fleet instantly severed. As the Tenacity plunged into the disintegrating enemy vessel, Reed opened a broadcast channel to all Earth forces. This is Captain Marcus Reed of the Earth Alliance warship Tenacity. We have struck at the heart of the Void. Their command ship is falling. Their network is broken. They can be beaten. They can be destroyed. They took everything from us. Now we show them what humans become when hope dies and only wrath remains. The transmission cut off as the Tenacity and the Void command ship erupted in a blinding flash of energy that rippled outward, striking every Void vessel in the fleet. One by one, they began to falter and fail, their coordinated attack dissolving into chaos. Earth's defensive fleet, witnessing the unprecedented opportunity, surged forward, targeting the now vulnerable enemy ships with everything they had. In the days that followed, the story of the Tenacity's final stand spread throughout human space. The Void retreated, their first major defeat forcing them to reassess their strategy. Earth mourned its losses but prepared for the war that would surely continue. On the bridge of the flagship Defiance, Fleet Admiral Jackson addressed the combined forces of humanity. Captain Reed and a crew of the Tenacity showed us that the Void are not invincible. They can be fought. They can be defeated. Today we honor their sacrifice by continuing what they began. On screens throughout the ship, tactical displays showed hundreds of Earth vessels being retrofitted with technology adapted from Reed's modifications to the Tenacity. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to understand and reproduce the frequency disruption that had proven so effective. The war has only begun, Jackson continued. But thanks to one ship, one captain who refused to surrender even after 80 years of torment, we now have hope. He paused, looking at the assembled officers. No, we have more than hope. We have the knowledge that what the Void feared most about humanity was true. We do not break. We adapt. We overcome. And when pushed to our limits, we rise again, stronger than before. The fleet moved out, carrying with them the legacy of the Tenacity and its captain. A ghost ship returned from the darkness, bringing with it the one thing the Void had never anticipated: the terrible wrath